for being here this afternoon. I think at least a few of you were present last week when Prime Minister Philip Davis announced that the Bahamas would be launching the Bahamas Debt Conversion for Marine Conservation Project. And that's a very lengthy name, which speaks to two major benefits for the Bahamas. That is the debt management structure and funding for ocean areas and for marine conservation. This afternoon, we're very pleased to have with us Mrs. Rochelle Newbold. She's been our champion around the table on matters related to climate, and of course, she's a special advisor here in the Office of the Prime Minister. She is fresh, by the way, back from COP meetings in Azerbaijan, which is why she wasn't able to attend the launch last week. But what we plan to do today is hear from her on some of the environmental aspects of the plan. You heard much of that during the press briefing last week, where you heard from Minister for Economic Development, the Honourable Michael Halkitis. We're also joined today by Karen Panton. She is one of the stakeholders. She's Executive Director of the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund, one of the stakeholders which will help to manage and execute the terms of this plan. I'd like to start off with Rochelle Newbold with details of how the environment or how this plan affects environmental conservation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming today, because I hope to provide clarity and add additional details on the recently announced Bahamas Debt Conversion Project for Marine Conservation. The project's main objectives are to, 1, safeguard livelihoods, particularly in sectors that rely on the marine environment, such as fisheries and tourism. It protects the natural barriers like mangroves and coral reefs that shield our communities from storm surges and erosion, and it will create opportunities for jobs through capacity building and technical support in marine management. And finally, it would also seek to strengthen the capacities of government and Bahamian NGOs who are acting in this space. In short, it provides a pathway for sustainable economic growth while protecting the natural resources of which we all depend. You will note in that descriptor, I didn't say anything about buying. I didn't say anything about selling, because these things have no role to play in this program. For more than 65 years, the Bahamas has been the leader in the region on conservation, with approximately 17 million acres of protected areas throughout our archipelago. But what we have lacked was a strong and robust financing mechanism to support the management of these systems, such that the economic benefits could be tracked, enhanced, and reported on. We, as a people, fundamentally understand the environmental benefits we achieve through these areas, but this project will help us to quantify the economic benefits to communities and put in place proper management systems to enhance these benefits. Many of us in the Family Islands, we are aware that that piece of land, that area offshore, is a protected area. But what we could never do was say, well, how much money really comes back to the communities because of the presence of these areas. And this is what this project intends to do. We have had these protected areas on the books for more than 30 years, but we could never speak to the actual economic value that they place. The debt conversion project allows the Bahamas to refinance $300 million in external debt through partnerships with global institutions such as the Inter-American Development Bank, the Nature Conservancy, and Standard Chartered Bank. And in so doing, it will unlock $124 million in savings over the next 15 years. It is intended that those savings would then be utilized by being pumped and redirected with the aid of the Bahamas Protected Areas Management Fund, to communities, to NGOs, and to the government agencies who have responsibility for those conservation matters. The project will also fund climate-smart conservation plans, develop national mangrove management strategy, and create a marine spatial plan for the effective governance of our marine resources. These efforts are not only critical for for biodiversity, but also for mitigating impacts of climate change on our communities. The Bahamas takes up more than 50% of what we call the Caribbean because of the length in which we encompass from the United States all the way to Cuba. To have a management plan that gives governance over that space is critically important for us. Many times I've stood up here and talked to you about climate change. I've talked to you about the increasing temperatures that we're going to be facing. We've talked about the impacts that the corals are presently experiencing. All of these have an economic knock-on effect on these resources. How are we, the largest holder of ocean space in the region, going to address these impacts? We're not seeking to impose taxes on individuals. We're not seeking to take out additional loans to address it. But what we are seeking to do is to refinance debt that we already have, to utilize those savings to address those things. A lot of the international financing mechanisms that are going on right now require some level of environmental program or project to be tacked on to these financial loans. And for us, we chose to use the opportunity to have that program that's tacked on to those debt conversions to be attributed to our conservation plans. This initiative also ensures that conservation efforts will endure beyond the 15-year term of the debt conversion project, as a $20 million endowment is expected to grow by 2039, and it will provide a lasting pipeline for financing for marine conservation. This forward-thinking approach secures resources for the long term, ensuring that the Bahamas remains a leader in sustainable marine management. And on a global scale, this project positions the Bahamas as a pioneer in climate financing and marine conservation by leveraging our national capital and working with international partners. We are settling on a precedent for other small island developing states. We are also showing that innovative solutions can help nations overcome the challenges of high debt burdens and environmental vulnerabilities. If you were paying attention to the outcomes of COP, you will see that small island states and least developed nations such as ourselves need to look at creative ways and means of financing some of the issues that we are going to be faced with because of the issue of climate change. And this is just one of the ways in which we can address those things. Let me state again. We are not selling. We are not putting any of our assets in debt. We are not giving over our resources for anybody else to come into the space to manage. Those individuals that are involved in this program are the Department of Marine Resources, the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, the Bahamas National Trust, the Forestry Unit, and the Office of the Prime Minister. All of these are individuals and entities that you are familiar with, that are 100% Bahamian owned, and that are involved in this process. We retain the ownership of our resources and our rights. There has been no sovereign sell-off. This is just an opportunity, just like how you would refinance your car or refinance your house mortgages to address a need that you as a family may have. This is what we have done in order to aid in pumping financing into the conservation program that we have had for years that needed to be addressed because the pressures that are coming upon those resources and the pressures that are going to be coming upon us with in the issue of climate financing is going to require us to be very creative, to be able to think quickly on our feet, and to be able to track and report on these benefits so everybody has an understanding as to what is being done. So that is my opening statement, but I also want to allow my colleague, Mrs. Panton, from the Bahamas Protected Areas Fund to also speak to when I said it will build capacities amongst the government as well as the NGO communities and actors that are happening in the space. I want her to share some more information on what that really entails and what that looks like.